Welcome back to Why the Hell Do We Care? Today's episode is pretty Dynasty Warriors heavy, with only Joan of Arc and Rachel being the combo breakers. So let's get started with the God of War Guan Yu. It's generally unknown when Guan Yu was born, but he was one of the original Dynasty Warriors. He is the sworn brother of the Shu Emperor Liu Bei, and fought alongside him as far back as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. He is greatly respected by every kingdom and is even known as the God of War. In fact, he was later deified as a god of brotherhood and righteousness called Guan Di. He was most well known for three things. First is kicking 10 kinds of ass wherever he goes. The second was for his beard, which was almost 2 feet long. And lastly, for being loyal to Liu Bei almost to a fault. You could almost say that's what got him killed. Wu and Shu had an alliance to fight Wei, and Wu had let Shu borrow the province of Jing to aid them in their fight, and Guan Yu was put in charge of the area. Well, when Wu thought it was time for them to get it back, Guan Yu kept on saying no because his brother Liu Bei did not want to return it. So when Guan Yu assaulted Fang Castle, they saw their opportunity to take their land back and struck. Guan Yu was executed alongside his son Guan Ping, and his head was sent to Cao Cao, who buried it in a dignified manner due to his respect for him. Now let's see how the God of War earned his title. Surprisingly, Guan Yu is not a power type. He is in fact a technique type. He does fall into the slow but powerful type character, although I think his attack speed is higher than guys like Huang Gai. His EX attack is on his C1 and grants him increased attack and defense. His C3 is a nice multi-hitting attack for fighting 1v1. His C4 hits on a very wide arc in front of him, so it is great for taking out groups. His C6 is like a more powerful C4, hitting in a very wide arc in front of him and dealing some good damage. His ground R1 hits all around him, and his aerial R1 is a group of 3 shockwaves. His Miso hits like a friggin' truck all around him and can easily clear house. The passive for the God of War is of course Potence, which boosts the team's attack. Overall, Guan Yu is a really solid character. He may not have the flashiest charge attacks, but they get the job done and have some real power behind them. Sun Quan is the second son of Sun Jian and was born in 182 AD, and he first joined the cast in Dynasty Warriors 2. Well, we have our first emperor from the Three Kingdoms, and he hails from Wu. He took the role of leadership after the death of his brother Sun Ce. In the games, he is depicted having a bit of an inferiority complex being compared to his father and brother. This is not helped by the beating Zhang Liao gave him at the Battle of Hefei. Zhang Liao almost succeeded in assassinating him during the battle after cutting off his escape by destroying the only bridge back to the Wu camp. However, Sun Quan was able to spur his horse to great speeds and jump the full length of the bridge with his horse to escape. Thanks to the support of his officers, especially Lian Xie, he gets over his feelings of inferiority and becomes a great leader of his people. In Dynasty Warriors 8, it is possible to save Sun Jian and Sun Ce, but when Sun Quan tries to return leadership after they recover, his family says that is unnecessary since they think he is doing a great job. Now let's see how the Emperor of Wu defends his people. Sun Quan is a speed type and wielder of a one-handed sword like Sima Zhao, and as of Dynasty Warriors 8, Sun Quan is pretty much the owner of this weapon type. Their moveset is really similar outside of Sun Quan having a couple more hits instead of shockwaves on some of his charge attacks. So unlike with Zhu Rong, I'm just going to talk about the differences between Sun Quan and Sima Zhao. The big differences are of course their EX attacks, R1s, Musos, and passives. Sun Quan's EX attack is off his C3 like Zhao. Unfortunately, it's no human surfing, but he does plow through his enemies in a giant flaming tornado, so that is awesome. His ground R1 is a 2-hit combo that guard breaks so the explosion will always hit. His aerial R1 has him create a ring of fire around himself that he flings at his enemies for light damage. His Miso is pretty much a bigger version of his EX attack and hits very wide, so it's awesome for taking down mooks. His passive is regeneration, which accelerates Miso gauge recovery while inactive, and we all know how I feel about that one by now. Overall, mechanically, Sima Zhao and Sun Quan are really similar in ability, so it's hard to rate one above the other. Style-wise, I prefer Zhao for his ZX attack alone. Xiahou Ba's date of birth is unknown, but he joined the cast in Dynasty Warriors 7. He is the second son of the famous Wei general Xiahou Yuan. He participates in the battles of Wujiang Plains and joins the Sima family in many other battles. However, when the Sima family kills the Wei Emperor Cao Shuang and takes control of Wei, Xiahou Ba fears that he will be executed for his family's strong ties to the Cao family and flees and defects to Shu. Unfortunately, during Jiang Wei's final northern campaign, he is captured and executed. I also want to bring up his weapon. In 7 in Warriors Orochi, he wields a huge sword that he shares with Guan Ping. However, in Dynasty Warriors 8, he got a new weapon called the Siege Spear. Seriously, look at this thing. It's a rocket-powered spear, and if it wasn't for Huang Gai and his boat, and a couple other weapons, I would call this the craziest weapon in the game, and that's saying a lot. As you might expect from someone wielding a giant hunk of iron, Xiahou Ba is a power type. Also, as you might expect, he has extremely good range and power on his S string, but it is pretty slow. His C4 EX attack is probably my favorite attack from him. It's a double shockwave with really nice range and some good damage behind it. His C5 has a very big area of effect as well for launching groups of enemies. His C6 is like his C4, but he first generates a shockwave around him before launching the long range attack. In my opinion, it's not as good as his C4, as I tend to stick with that. His ground R1 is a decent combo attack that also boosts his attack and greatly increases his attack speed temporarily. His air R1 is a spinning combo followed by a shockwave that isn't that great in my opinion. His Musou has him spin his sword around and generate a massive field of electricity, which is good for taking out groups. His passive is Solidity, which reduces damage taken from officers. Overall, Xiahou Ba is great for taking down large groups. His ground R1 also helps him cover his biggest weakness, so he is a pretty good character overall as long as you keep his Musou up. Cao Ren joined up in Dynasty Warriors 4 and was born in 168 AD. He is a cousin of the Wei Emperor Cao Cao and loyally served Wei all his life. Cao Ren is pretty much the tank of the Wei forces. If Guan Yu is like an unstoppable spear, then Cao Ren is an impenetrable shield. He is most well known as the commander of Fang Castle during Guan Yu's siege. Even after Guan Yu had flooded Fang Castle and morale was at an all-time low, Cao Ren was still able to rally his men into holding out for reinforcements to arrive. He died in 223 AD of natural causes. Now let's see how the tank fights back. Cao Ren is a power type that has a surprisingly high attack speed, although he runs pretty slowly. His flail hits in wide arcs around him and attacks pretty quickly. His C4 EX attack is pretty great, with a couple wide swings that go into an unblockable throw where he drains the life out of his foe and heals himself. His C5 is also an unblockable launcher. His C6 again is an unblockable throw where he grabs one poor foe and swings them around him to damage other enemies. His ground R1 is an alright combo hitting all around him, and his aerial is yet another unblockable throw. His Musou is pretty much a much bigger version of his C6 that hits more times for more damage. Naturally, the Iron Wall of Wei's passive is Fortitude, which strengthens the party's defenses. Cao Ren is a pretty great officer killer with all of his unblockable attacks, so not many people can defend against the damage he dishes out. Rachel is yet another Ninja Gaiden / Dead or Alive crossover character and is new to the Ultimate Edition. She is a half-human, half-fiend hunter that helps Ryu Hayabusa out. In the first Ninja Gaiden Sigma, she was playable during a couple of chapters as well. She initially is hunting her sister Alma for falling to her fiend half and turning evil. Unfortunately, as is the norm of female side characters in games full of demons and zombies, she gets captured by the bad guys and is almost sacrificed. But her sister sacrifices herself to save her and dies in Rachel's arms. Now let's see the full armament of a fiend hunter. Rachel is a power type that is really fast. I'd say her S-string attack speed is like Ryu's level of speed. However, she seems to have traded her range for her speed. Her C3 is actually a decent combo with some range though. Her C4 hits all around her, but again is pretty short range outside of the explosion at the finish, so it's better for one-on-one fights. Her C5 EX attack is a pretty great officer killer where she knocks her foe into the air before filling them full of lead and then jumping over them to shoot them even more from the air. Her C6 is a long-range shockwave, so it's good for some crowd clearing options for her. Her ground R1 is just rapid-fire machine gunning that is pretty decent on a single target. Her aerial is a more spray-and-pray version of her ground R1. Her Merceau is one of her spells from Ninja Gaiden that attack everyone around her with shadowy spears from the ground. Her passive is Expertise, which makes weapon compatibility rise faster, which can be handy if you are grinding big star weapons. Overall, Rachel is decent. Her lack of range does hamper her a bit, but her fast attacks allow her to move through groups quickly to make it less of an issue. Joan of Arc joins the cast from a game we haven't talked about yet, Bladestorm: The 100 Years' War. She was born a peasant in France, and at about the age of 12, she claimed to have visions from God telling her to drive out the English from France. At about 16, she visited the royal court and gave a remarkable prediction about the war. After much scrutiny by the French church to ensure that her predictions did not come from the devil, she was declared to be of irreproachable life and a good Christian. She was then allowed into the French army and helped to break the siege of Orleans by using much more aggressive tactics than the French had employed during the campaign. For her exploits and loyalty to the French monarchy, Joan and her family were granted nobility. In May of 1430, she was captured and handed over to the English government, and she was tried for heresy. With a lot of pressure from the nobility, she pretty much had a sham trial and was prosecuted as guilty of heresy and a practitioner of witchcraft. She was burned at the stake May 30th of 1431. 25 years after the war ended, she was posthumously retrialed and she was deemed innocent. Before we get into Joan's fighting style, let's talk about the game she comes from. I originally picked up the game thinking it would be a more European-themed Dynasty Warriors game. I was very wrong. Like Dynasty Warriors, it is based around a historical period of European history during the 100 Years' War. The graphics are alright, it's detailed enough that it's not hard to recognize what exact units you are fighting or working with. The music is the usual grand orchestra god choir type of affair that these kind of games tend to have. The voice acting?
Come back to us unharmed.
Well, it's pretty bad to be honest, and Lord knows I can't tell what everyone's accent is at times. Special mention to Philippe Le Bon as the worst one in the game, who unfortunately I did not get the chance to record for this video. The gameplay is totally different from a Warriors game. Instead of commanding a known historical figure, you play as a random mercenary looking for fame and fortune during the war. The main hub of the game is the tavern. Here you pick your contracts, buy your gear, apply your skill points, recruit other mercenary teams, and hear rumors. So, you find a contract with a payment you like, and it's off to the battlefield. First time I hit the battlefield, I ran out alone like a dumbass. And this led to me getting instantly slaughtered because you're pretty much playing a generic foot soldier and not a man worth 1,000 like in Dynasty Warriors. Instead of charging in alone, you're actually supposed to fight as the leader of a team of soldiers on the battlefield. You just run out to pretty much any allied group on the field, hit X when their icon lights up, and bam, you are leading them. To get your guys to attack, you run at the enemies and hold down R1 and watch your guys fight their guys till everyone's dead. Just doing that would be kind of boring, so you can also activate the unit's skills with square, triangle, and circle buttons, like the Halberd's scythe attack on triangle or their attack buff on circle. There is a kind of Pokemon-esque rock, paper, scissors thing going on, with certain units being good against others. For example, swordsmen are strong against rapiers and daggers but get their asses kicked by spearmen, who get torn apart by axemen, and so on and so forth. It's easy to tell if you have an advantage in battle by the enemy icons. If it is shiny, you can kill it easy, and if it's dark, you will get your ass kicked. You can also hire 3 teams of mercenaries so you can summon your favorite class whenever you want. Most contracts boil down to capture a certain stronghold. You can only take over a stronghold after killing the stronghold's base commander. The dude is kind of shy and only appears after either killing all of the stronghold's guard units, the ones with the shields around their icons, or by getting an AI unit to actually get into the stronghold center. The last one requires the AI to be competent, so I usually rely on the first option. Bladestorm is an interesting game. It definitely isn't for everyone and isn't about just smashing your way to victory. If you ignore the whole rock, paper, scissors system, it will most likely end with you getting your ass kicked, so you have to move carefully and think about your unit's strengths and weaknesses. Although if you use your skills wisely or are over-leveled, you can still overcome a disadvantaged situation. There are a ton of different units even within the same weapon class. The sword class alone has 6 different types of units under it, so there is a lot of variety. There are also some balance issues with some classes overshadowing others. Cavalry units are pretty overpowered and can win against infantry even if they are technically weak to them, since they never sit still for infantry to actually swing their weapons at them. So about the only thing that can hit them are archers, and even then Lancer type cavalry have a skill that nullifies one attack. So they can usually just activate that, charge in, run away and wait for it to cool down, and then run right back in again. The game got a revamped release for the PS4, Xbox One, and PS3 called Bladestorm Nightmare, with a second scenario where Joan of Arc turns evil and leads an army of wizards and dragons. I guess it's based around if those false accusations of heresy were true. It also adds some online features such as allowing other players to control enemy units or a 2-player co-op mode. It also rebalances some of the units too. Overall, the game is pretty unique and has some interesting ideas that I think deserve being looked at. It can be grindy at times though, just as a warning, but if you don't mind that, it can be fun. It's about $20 up on the PSN, so it's pretty cheap if you are curious. Or you can go get its new re-release with all its updates. At the time of writing this, I haven't played the revamped version, so I can't really say much about it. Could be they fixed any issues I had with the game and is a lot better. Either way, I say give it a look and you may be pleasantly surprised. Joan of Arc is a pretty good wonder type. Her S string is pretty quick and has some good range and arc to it. Her C3 is pretty short ranged, but it has a lot of hits to it if you land it right. Her C4 is a 360 spin that is fairly decent. Her C5 EX attack is her showstopper though. First it hits around her with lightning, and then it follows up with a rain of arrows. It is probably her best attack for taking down groups of enemies. Her C6 is also pretty good as it generates huge ground explosions in a line from her and it can hit multiple times. Her ground R1 boosts her strength as well as the allies around her. The aerial R1 creates a field that heals herself and allies in it. Her Musso is also pretty good as it hits all around her multiple times for good damage. Her passive is Fellowship, which boosts switch combo damage, which as I have said before, I am not a fan of. Joan is a pretty good character. She has decent attack speed and some good charge attacks, backed up by her ability to buff and heal, making her handy in a lot of groups. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you all will join me in the next episode where I recruit one of my brother's favorite characters. And after that, we are going to raid Diamondback's base to try and save the hostages that he was using to force our allies to fight us. I'm Rihanna of Bahamut, and I hope to see you all again next time.